I can't believe you're doing this. This is my property and I will not be intimidated.
I still remember the exact morning my life flipped upside down because of an HOA. Karen, and it started with a knock that felt less like a knock and more like a warning. I live in Arizona on the edge of a quiet Phoenix suburb, the kind of place where the sun cooks the pavement and everyone pretends nothing shady ever happens. I just poured my coffee when I looked out the window and saw her standing on my driveway, clipboard in hand, pink dress blinding in the sunlight, smile sharp enough to cut glass. At that moment, I had no idea she was about to try stealing my land. Let me rewind, because what you need to understand first is, I am not a troublemaker. I bought this house fair and square, paid for the survey, paid for the fence paid for. Piece my backyard backs up to a dry wash. Nothing fancy, but it is mine. Every inch of it a door, at least it was, until the HOA decided they wanted it. The HOA president, Karen, mid-50s, voice like a siren, attitude like a dictator, had moved into the neighborhood. A year earlier, ever since then, it was citations, letters, threats, and fines for things nobody ever cared about before: trash cans, facing the wrong direction, grass half an inch too, tall flag angle incorrect. Everyone complained quietly. Nobody wanted. Smoke. I kept my head down until that morning she told me, without even saying hello, that I was in violation of newly updated community boundaries. I laughed because it sounded ridiculous. She did not laugh. She said the HOA had reclassified part of my backyard as protected community land. She said my fence was illegal. She said I had 30 days to remove it or face daily fines. She said it like she was reading a grocery list. I told her she was wrong. She told me she had documents. I told her I had dead. She smiled wider. Here is where it gets weird. She leaned closer, lowered her voice, and said, off the record, it would be easier for everyone if I just complied. She said the HOA had plans: walking trails, green space, property value improvements, all buzzwords. No details. I asked why my land. She said random selection. That was lie number one. After she left, I did what any sane person would. Checked my property survey, checked county records. I checked everything. Nothing had changed. My land was still my land, so I thought that was the end of it. It was not. The letters started. Arriving certified mail, violation notices. Fine. Warnings, legal language meant to scare. They claimed emergency authority. They claimed environmental protections. They claimed I was obstructing community access. Then one afternoon, I came home and found orange stakes hammered into my yard, inside my fence, inside my property line. That's when my stomach dropped. I went straight to the HOA office. Karen was waiting like she knew I was coming. She told me calmly that the board had voted. She told me resistance would cost mesh, told me lawyers were expensive. She told me to think about my future. I walked out shaken, not scared, angry. That night, I started digging, not literally, yet records, emails, board minutes, old newsletters, zoning maps, and something did not add up. The land they wanted was not random. It lined up perfectly with a planned private access road, one that led straight to undeveloped desert owned by an LLC. An LLC registered 3 months earlier. Guess who was listed as a managing member? Karen. That was the moment I realized this was not about grass or rules. This was a land grab band. I was standing in the way, but before I could act, before I could expose anything, before I could even sleep, heard machinery outside my window just after sunrise, and when I pulled the curtains back, I saw a bulldozer idling inches from my fence with HOA security standing nearby, and Karen watching from the sidewalk, smiling like she had already won. The bulldozer was real. That was the part my brain struggled with. Not a threat, not a letter, not a fine, but actual steel and diesel parked inches from my fence, like my property was already. I ran outside barefoot, yelling like an idiot, asking what the hell they thought they were doing. The HOA security guy did not even look at me. Karen did. She said this was a scheduled maintenance operation. She said I had been notified. She said if I interfered, she would call the police. That was funny because I already Hottie stepped between the bulldozer and my fence and pulled out my phone. I told the operator to shut it down. He hesitated. Karen snapped at him to proceed. That was the moment I flipped the script. I said loudly for everyone to hear that I was recording shit. Said this land was under my name. I said any damage would be criminal. I said the county had not approved anything. I said her LLC owned the desert parcel behind my house. Her smile cracked. Just a little. She told me I was confused. She told me I was harassing. HOA staff, she told me to step aside, so I asked her one simple question. Why? Does the HOA need a private access road that lines up perfectly with land you personally own? Shay froze. The security guy looked at her. The operator shut the engine off. That was my first win, small but loud. She told everyone to stand down. She told me this was not over. She told me lawyers would be in touch by. That evening, the neighborhood was buzzing. People started messaging me quietly, screenshots, old emails, stories. Turns out, was not the only one. 2 other homeowners had been fined into selling chunks of land. One retired couple had their fence removed while they were out of town. Another guy moved away after nonstop violations. Patterns started forming. I spent nights turning into a full-blown investigator. Public record, LLC filings, HOA board votes. Every trail led back to Karen and 2 board members who never disagreed with her. Here is the dark, funny part. She was sloppy. She used her personal email for HOA business. She forwarded documents to herself. She forgot to redact names. I built a folder, screenshots, audio, emails, maps. Then I did something risky. I requested to speak at the next HOA meeting. She could not deny me without making it obvious. The room was packed. People standing along the wall. Screen opened the meeting like nothing was wrong, smiling, cheerful. Public comment opened. I stood up. My heart was pounding, but my voice was counting. But my voice was calm. I said, I had questions about land reclassification, about emergency authority, about conflicts of interest. She tried to shut me down. I asked her why her LLC was not disclosed. Gasps, whispers. She said I was spreading misinformations. So I pulled out printed documents. I held them up. I read the LLC name. I read her signature. That is when she lost control. She shouted. She pointed. She accused me of defamation. And then the projector turned on behind her because someone had sent me the login credentials earlier that day. The screen lit up with emails. Her emails, plans, maps, profit estimates. The room exploded. But right before the meeting could completely fall apart, Karen leaned toward the microphone and said something that made the entire room go silent. Said if I did not back off, she would make sure I lost everything. And that was when I realized this fight was about to get a lot more dangerous. The room stayed quiet for a second after she said that, the kind of quiet where everyone is holding their breath. Then someone laughed nervously. Then someone else said, did she just threaten him? Karen smiled again, like she had not just said something insane. She said she meant legally. She always meant legally. The meeting ended early. She adjourned it like she was slamming a door. People poured out whispering, looking at me like I had just poked a sleeping rattlesnake. That night, my door camera went offline for exactly 12 minutes. Not a power outage, just my camera when it came back on. I saw her Karen standing at my fence talking to someone in a hoodie, pointing at my yard. I did not sleep. The next morning, code enforcement showed up. Not a Sioux City. They said there had been a complaint about unpermitted structures. My fence, my shed, my patio, all suddenly under reviewed. That was escalation number 2. I stayed calm. I showed permits. They took notes. They left an hour later. My employer called HR. Anonymous complaint, accusations, nothing proven, but enough to trigger an internal review. That was escalation number 3. Here is where she messed up. She got greedy. Received an email from the HOA legal counsel offering a settlement. If I donated the disputed land to the HOA, all fines would be dropped, future violations forgiven, peace restored, donation of my land. He forwarded that email to a real estate attorney and a journalist I had already been quietly talking to. Both replied within minutes. This is coercion. This is fraud. This is news. I started wearing a body cam, not obvious, clipped under my shirt. 2 days later, Karen showed up again. A clipboard this time, no smile. She said we needed to talk neighbor to neighbor. She said things had gone too far. She said mistakes were made. Asked her to repeat that she did on Kamara. Then she offered me money straight up. She said cash would be easier. No paper trail. That was the moment I knew I had. Harry told her I needed time. I said I would consider it. She relaxed. Big mistake that night. The journalist sent me a draft, my story not published yet, but detailed names, documents, maps. He said once this goes live, it cannot be put back. He asked if I was ready before I could answer. My phone rang. No number. It was Karen. Her voice shaking, she asked what I had done, she asked. Who I had talked to, told her calmly that I was done being bullied, told her everything was documented, told her the truth always comes out. She hung up. 30 minutes later, police lights lit up my street, my house. Someone had reported a domestic disturbance. Someone claimed screaming and threats. I stepped outside with my hands visible body. Cam recording, neighbors watching. The officer looked confused. Said the call came from the HOA office number. That was the moment the neighborhood turn phones came out. People recorded whispers turned into anger. Karen watched from her porch across the street, not smiling now as the police left without incident. I felt my phone buzzy. Message from the journalist. She just tried to frame, "We are publishing tomorrow." I looked back at Karen. She locked eyes with me, pure hatred on. Then she mouthed something that sent a chill through my spine. "You started this." She had no idea how wrong she was. The article dropped the next morning before the sun even burned the haze off. Arizona sky woke up to my phone vibrating like it was possessed. Messages, texts, calls, voicemails, all stacked on top of each other. Local news had picked it up, then state blogs, then a national HOA watchdog channel. Karen was not just an HOA president anymore. She was a headline. I walked outside, and neighbors I had never spoken to nodded at me like we were old friends. One guy gave me a thumbs up. Another whispered, "Finally." Karen did not come outside by noon. The HOA website went offline by 1 p.m. The board sent an emergency email saying there would be no further enforcement actions until further notice by 2 p.m. County investigators were at the HOA office. That should have been the end. It was not. At 4 p.m., I found a notice taped to my door. Notice of immediate access environmental inspection, signed by the HOA. Fake, sloppy, illegal. That's when the humor hit. Mesh was panicking. I called the investigator assigned to the KCA side. He said she had been calling all day. He said she kept talking herself into deeper holes that night. Someone tried to cut my fence, not all the way, just enough to send a message. I did not react publicly. I uploaded the footage privately, time-stamped clear as Dave, a hoodie guy from before, walking straight from Karen house. The journalist added it as an update. The next morning, protesters showed up in front of the HOA office, signs, phones. Chance Karen tried to hold another meeting. Nobody showed up except lawyers. Then the real twist hit. The LLC land behind my house, the one she wanted access to, was under investigation for an unrelated zoning violation. Turns out the access road was not just about convenience. It was required for a pending sale. Without it, the land was nearly worthless. Her entire plan hinged on stealing my backyard. When that leaked, her allies vanished. Board members resigned. One flipped. Immediately, mails poured out, deals, threats, profit splits. I sat at my kitchen table watching her empire collapse in real time. It felt unreal. Then she showed up at my door. No clipboard note, pink dress, just anger and fear. She said we could still fix this. She said she would resign. She said she would make me whole. I told her to leave. She did not. She stepped closer. She said I was ruining her life. I told her she did that herself. She slapped my phone out of my hand. Big mistake. Police arrived fast this time, not for me, as they walked her away. She screamed that I would regret this, that people like me never win. The neighbors filmed everything, but even then I knew it was not over yet, because power does not disappear quietly, and Karen still had one move left. Ty just did not know what it was yet. I woke up that morning feeling the weight of the entire neighborhood pressing down on me like some twisted cosmic joke. I had spent weeks digging through garbage files, emails, secret recordings, and half-truths, and now it all boiled down to today. The day I finally faced her, the queen of chaos, the HOA Karen. The woman who thought pink dresses and a clipboard gave her the power to destroy everyone. I had seen her in the cul-de-sac, glaring at me like a hawk before, but today she did not know. I was armed with evidence that could make the entire HOA crumble like a cheap sandcastle under a high tide. I poured myself some coffee, burned my tongue thinking typical me, and grabbed my backpack stuffed with files, camera footage, and audio recordings of her harassment calls, meetings where she laughed at our neighborhood complaints like they were stand-up jokes, and even receipts of illegal construction notices she had tried to forge. I walked out into the sunlit street feeling like some vigilante from a bad superhero movie, but I had no cape, no spandex, only a notebook, and the righteous fury of a man pushed too far and as I approached her house, I noticed something unusual. The mailbox was tilted slightly, and I could swear. I saw her gloves peeking from behind the bushes. My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my cool. This was the final showdown. I had rehearsed in my head for weeks. I knocked on the door and heard the heels clicking from inside. She opened it, looking even more ridiculous than I remembered, pink dress, perfectly pressed HOA badge glinting in the morning sun, and a smirk that screamed, "I own this street." Before I could say anything, she waved a finger at me and said, "Well, well, well, if it is not the little troublemaker of the cul-de-sac." I smiled and said, "Good morning, Karen. We need to talk." She tilted her head suspiciously like a cartoon villain and said, "Oh, really? What about—" And I pulled out the first envelope of evidence and said, "About this, about all your little games and fake notices and forged documents." She gasped like I had slapped her across the face with a wet towel, and I continued laying it out: every email, every secret meeting, every shady deal with local developers, every attempt to illegally expand HOA land, grabbing my neighbors' lawns and even my driveway. I could see her facade cracking just a little, but she was still dangerous, still calculating, so I had to keep the pressure on, I said. "And guess what? The city inspector is coming today with a court order." And she turned white. Her eyes darted back and forth like a trapped animal. Suddenly, I heard a horn outside and looked through the window to see half the neighborhood gathered, filming the whole thing on their phones, whispering chaos and excitement. This was the moment I had dreamed of. The moment when the HOA kingpin would finally meet her match. She tried to interrupt, shouting orders, threats, intimidation, but I held up a hand and said, "Please finish your meltdown." After the inspector arrived, I could hear the steps on the porch and felt the adrenaline surge. Karen knew she could not lie anymore. She tried to step in front of me, but the inspector waved her aside, and I watched as her perfect pink dress seemed to shrink in terror. The inspector went through our files, and my recordings pointed out illegal notices, construction code violations, and harassment complaints filed against her. I could see the reality finally hitting her face. The smirk gone, replaced with panic and disbelief. She tried one last bluff, but I had video of her forging signatures and audio of her threatening neighbors. It was over. I felt my hands shaking with relief, triumph, and exhaustion at the same time. I stepped back and let justice do its work. The inspector made her step down from HOA. President announced fines and legal action and told her she would have to repay the neighborhood for all damages she had caused. I could hear cheers from neighbors clapping. And filming every second of her downfall, I looked around at the people who had been victims of her tyranny and saw smiles. This is full of relief and hope. I realized how much courage it took to fight back and how sweet justice tasted in the end. Karen was escorted away, still shouting nonsense, but no one listened. She had lost all power and credibility. The neighborhood felt alive again. Flowers seemed brighter, grass greener. The cul-de-sac no longer a battlefield, but a place of reclaiming peace. I went home that night, poured myself a drink, and reflected on everything: the chaos, the lies, the fear, and the bravery of ordinary people standing up to corruption. I smiled, knowing I had done the right thing. I had exposed the truth and seen a tyrant fall, and as I lay in bed, I thought about how this story would be remembered not just as HOA's drama, but as a testament to what happens when you refuse to stay silent, when the little guy fights back, and when karma decides it's finally time to serve justice. With a big fat dose of irony, I drifted off to sleep, imagining Karen in court, realizing her HOA kingdom was gone, and the neighborhood cheering every little victory over her chaos. It was the ending I had hoped for. Long nights of investigation, endless tension, emotional roller coaster, and humor finally came to a head, and justice had won the day. Which state you tuned in from? Don't forget to like and subscribe so we can take HOA down in America.